Hello guys, Hon MMA 13 back here, very ill. With a UFC fight night, Adesanya versus now Imavov. Sorry, I get them all mixed up. There is another guy who I'm about to talk about here with a very similar name. Uh, so this is the main card predictions. Bear with me, I'm not well. I think I might be dying. Fight number one, as just mentioned, Nazardine. Sorry, I keep getting them mixed up. I swear down, it's not on purpose. The same race. Mohamed Naimov versus Kanofli. Naimov, I'm never going to forgive him for what he did to Nathaniel Wood in that fight that was also in this region of the world. He got away with multiple fouls. He's fighting in the same region again, but he's fighting this time someone who's not quite as strong, for the division. Kanofli, I just don't think he's going to be able to handle the pressure that's going to be put on him in this fight. Now, in the last fight, I've got in my notes here, which I thought was quite interesting, that he's coming off a bad KO loss, which normally you'd think, oh, that's dangerous. I don't think Mohamed's the type of guy who's going to try and knock him out or take advantage of any kind of, when you've been knocked out, you sometimes are a bit hesitant. And I feel like Mohamed Namov's more the type of fighter who's just going to try and get you to the ground and just out hustle and out strength you on them grappling scenarios. And I think his ground and pound is actually quite underrated. Even though I don't like the guy, I've got to say he has got some good ground and pound. So I do think that could be possibly the way that Can gets finished here, because he's not going to be strong enough to handle the scrambles. Where normally maybe like a Nathaniel Wood, he's quite good at getting back to his feet or reversing position. He's done that in his most recent fight, actually. Nathaniel Wood, in his last decision in Manchester, I was there, and he was great in them ground situations. So I don't think that Canofli's that kind of level in them areas. He's got decent width, like when he's on the feet, he kind of keeps his range well. He's got good kicks, but he's not really that. He's not really that type of fighter that's going to be able to, hustle his way out of bad positions. And I think that's where he's going to get found out in this fight. I'd normally say a decision when it comes to someone like a Naimov. He doesn't really get that many finishes, but I do think he's actually going to get a finish here due to ground and pound. I think it's going to come late, just when he's war on Cannon, made his size advantage pay, and he's just going to be too much for Canofli, and he's going to get the third round TKO due to ground and pound, and the ref stepping in because they can't wait to give a victory to their guy. Moving on. Fight number 2 on the main card. Best fight on the main card other than the Kerr and the main, I think. Faraziam versus Mike Beast Davies. I honestly am a big fan of Mike Davies. I think he's one of the better American prospects, actually, because I don't feel like, when you're looking at the up and coming fighters in a lot of the divisions, a lot of them are either Brazilians or, Dagestani guys, Russians. So I think he's one to watch out for. He's 32 years of age. He's just came back with a great victory. He got the finish of someone who's actually been in the news recently due to Bryce Mitchell, Natan Levy. But it looks good on paper, that victory, but no one seems to mention that in that fight, Natan Levy struggled to make weight, and he actually gassed out in that fight, no pun intended, with the recent news cycle. So nothing meant by that, but you don't want to pile on with the Bryce Mitchell shit. But he's gassed out in that fight, and he got subbed. So people, look at that as an impressive win, because I rate Natan Levy. He's a good fighter, and Mike Davis had been out a while, and he got the victory there, and he got it by finish. And he can do it all. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can grapple, as he showed in that fight. But I do think that Faraz Ziam has just levelled up over the past year or so. People forget, man. No one mentions this, man. Faraz Ziam wants won a tight majority decision over Luigi Vendramini, who you might remember from being knocked out in round 1 by Paddy Pimblett on his debut. So that's the type of level that we was looking at with Faraz Ziam back in 2021. Fast forward to 2025, and he's actually could be a top 10 guy. Like, he looked against Matt Favola, and I know you can search Matt Favola. Even when Benoit Saint-Denis had that impressive performance against Matt Favola, he didn't have it all his own way. I know it was a quick finish, but he literally did look at times like it could go either way, like who's going to get finished, and then obviously coming out of that fence situation, he head kicked him. But I do think that Faraz Ziam just looked like a technical maestro in that fight, and his past 2 performances particularly, he's just looked like he's using that length, and he's fighting like with that advantage. He's almost like fighting like a more technical Jalen Turner, if that makes sense. Like, Jalen Turner tends to, use his range, and he has good, decent like jab. He has good technical striking, but he doesn't have the kicks that Ziam has. He doesn't have the shot selection that Ziam has. Like, Ziam was looking really good in that Favola performance, and his past few performances he's looked good. So I've got to go with Faraz Ziam here. I've seen a lot of people picking Davies because of the wrestling, but I just don't think that that's going to be a factor in this fight. Faraz has been taken down before in other fights, but the new and improved Faraz looks miles harder to get those takedowns on because he doesn't overextend as much. Like I said, his striking has become very technical and very impressive. So I've got to go for Faraz Ziam here. I do think it's going to be a decision. I don't think we're going to see a knockout like in his last fight because Matt Favola's just quite a chinny guy and it took him a while to get that knockout. But I think it's going to go to decision, but I think we're going to be looking at this and going, that was an impressive performance from Faraz Ziam. And also, he's going to have the fans on his side. The name says it all. Moving on. Fight number 3 on the main card. Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. Now, Nurmagomedov, I can't even say it. Said Nurmagomedov, he's a good fighter. He got beat by Jonathan Martinez a while ago. I remember when I watched that fight live, it was very close. I was glad to see Jonathan Martinez get the decision at the time because that was when it seemed like these Dagestani guys just weren't losing. We've seen different recently. But, and plus, a Dagestani not getting a close decision, when does that ever happen? So it was rare. But anyway, Said Nurmagomedov he's not like one of the better Nurmagomedovs. He's a good striker. He goes for a lot of spins. He has some very unique striking. And he is entertaining to watch, because bantamweights usually are very quick. Even the stuff on the ground is really high speed and it's quite entertaining, So, Said's not one of these guys who's just going to go straight for the takedown, but he has got tremendous jiu-jitsu. Like, he is actually probably, I'd say, one of the more impressive looking grapplers out of all the Dagestanis, and that's probably due to the weight classes in also. Obviously him and Umar are both quite fast, quite good strikers, So obviously, they're not going to go straight for that takedown because they're arrogant enough to think they can win fights just with the striking. And if it goes there, they know that they're going to be superior. And I actually see this fight, Vinicius Oliveira, I did want to get onto this point. Ever since that flying knee knockout, and obviously I remember watching that fight as well, he was getting beat up in that fight. People forget, man, that Sapaj was beating up on Oliveira in that fight. And then he got the finish last minute with a flying knee, which was really impressive, To have that burst of energy when you're getting beat up and then come out with something like that is always going to be extremely impressive. But you've got to remember, his recent fight when he fought someone of the higher level, he wasn't getting those finishes. And I think something like 76% of Vinicius Oliveira's victories have been by finish. And I only see him getting this win if he gets a finish. And Nurmagomedov, on the other hand, has never been finished. And he's faced people who are dangerous and who are higher level than Vinicius Oliveira at this point. And he's more experienced, Nurmagomedov. So I've got to go with him here. I do think he's going to get it by finish, Nurmagomedov. I think he's got too much variation. He's got great striking and he has got really good grappling. So I do think that he's just completely outgunned Vinicius Oliveira in all areas here. I think it's the biggest mismatch on this card because I do think it's a very well matched card. But I think this fight's going to be very straightforward, and I think he's going to get the finish in the second round via probably rear naked choke, because I can see it being where there's a panic scramble trying to get to his feet from Oliveira because he's just lost on the ground, and then he gets finished. He gets his back taken and he gets put out. Moving on to fight number 4 on the main card. And this is another great fight. Sergey Pavlovich versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Pavlovich, I was impressed with him, to be honest, in the Volkov. Not because of his performance, just because of his toughness. You don't see a lot of heavyweights who can withstand that type of beating, simply because a lot of them don't have the tank to go and take that much damage and still, stay up and continue plodding on. So Pavlovich has shown that he's definitely a top 5 heavyweight, because that's all you need to be a top 5 heavyweight, just to not be a fat waste of air. So I think he's really underrated now since the Tom Aspinall knockout. Rozenstruik is kind of in that top 10 area where he's not quite up there with them top 5, but he's not obese, so he's in the top 10, top 8 kind of area, which his ranking shows. But he looked, I mean, I'd love to say he looked good in his fight against Gassiev, but that was like the most memeable fight of all time. Like, Gassiev, he's fighting on this card as well, but obviously I'm just doing the main card for this video. But I'll mention Gassiev because he was one of Jairzinho's last opponent. He looked good in that fight. Rozenstruik, his striking's always been decent. He tends to be very damaging with his shots. He seems to have a habit of really not knocking people out cold, but you can tell that he's hurting people in there when he's landing, which is a heavyweight. It's expected. But certain heavyweights have that concussive power, and I think people look at Rozenstruik as one of the lighter hitters in the division, but I think he is powerful, just it's a different type of power. It's more of that hammer where it hurts, you know what I mean, rather than concussive. And I think that's going to make the difference in this fight. I think he's going to be able to hurt Pavlovich similar to how Volkov did, but the difference is he ain't got that concussive power. And I think if this fight goes past the second round, Rozenstruik's going to win. The problem is I don't see it going past the first. I think the concussive power from Pavlovich is going to make difference in this fight, and I think he's going to take him out. I think it's probably the least technical fight you're going to see on the card, because I don't think it's going to go any longer than 2 or 3 minutes. I think it's only going to go that long because of the fact that, as I've said, even though people think he's not a big hitter, Rozenstruik, people do respect his power because he can hurt you and he can wear on you. So I think he's going to get knocked out. I think he's going to get felt out in the first 3 rounds, and then his first 3 minutes, and then by that maybe 3rd minute of the first round, I think he's just going to get taken out. I think wait for that fight to get to that 3-minute mark, and that's when Pavlovich is going to start landing bombs, and I don't think it's going to take more than 2 or 3, because he isn't quite Aspinall level concussive, Pavlovich. All his finishes, he usually lands a flurry, but I think 2 or 3 clean strikes, he's going to be out, and it's going to be a first round finish and a comeback for the Russian Pavo. Moving on, the co-main, the best fight on the card. Now, I said earlier in this prediction that the Mike Davis fight was the best fight other than the 2 main fights. I actually think this fight's better than the main event, and the reason why you'll see later in the prediction. But going on with this fight, Michael Venom Page versus Sharabullet Magomedov. The reason I love this fight so much is because you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to stand up and trade. In the main event, which I'll get to later, it could get a bit boring. This fight is just going to be pure chaos on the feet. I've seen Michael Venom Page and Magomedov both, funnily, kind of saying they might go for takedowns, I don't know, giving us a little bit of a tease, but I don't see either of them going for takedowns because they both got the ego of wanting to show who's the better striker. They both have the exact same style. The only difference is that Michael Venom Page is a bit more karate stance, whereas Sharabullet's a bit more of a switch stance kind of guy, where he won't switch stances in the same way as a Michael Venom Page, where he'll kind of use big movements to get inside, and then he'll switch as he's throwing a shot. We saw that with Sharabullet when he got that finish where he went for the fist and then he spun back with the other one. But he's more of a conventional switch hitter where he'll just let people walk onto his shot. He won't kind of switch within throwing shots, like where you like, whoa, I didn't expect that shot to come from that angle. Because he fights with his hands down, whereas Shara Bullett's a bit more conventional. So I think that it's going to be a really interesting fight. These are my favourite type of fights to break down, as you can see. I can talk about these stand-up fights all day because I'm a Muay Thai fan, I'm a karate combat fan even, shout out. But I think this is going to be the best fight on the card. If you're any type of fan like I am that just loves to stand up mainly, but also has an appreciation for the technical kind of unorthodox kind of style, some people prefer that boxing style. I like the more Muay Thai, karate, I like the more balanced people who rely on using head movement. I've always been a fan of that, and that's the difference here. Michael Venom Page has the head movement, and Shara Bullet has one eye. And he doesn't have the head movement of a Michael Venom Page. And I think he's going to get caught here. I don't think he's going to get finished, but I think once he gets caught, he's going to start retreating. And then Michael Venom Page is going to do what he does best, which is just pick shots. As I mentioned in one of my early predictions about Faraz Siam, Michael Venom Page, underrated at how good he is at picking shots. People talk a lot about how his head movement's out of this world. His shot selection is the best thing about his style. And I've always loved watching Michael Venom Page break people down. I think he's going to do this in a similar way to what he did in the Kevin Holland fight. I think he's going to possibly get taken down here. Because if there is any of these guys who will go for a takedown and not just teasing that, I believe it will be Shara Bullet Magomedov. I actually got a lot of slack for when I said in a previous Shara Bullet video that he has got the wrestling and he might go for a takedown. Because obviously look how that ended, his fight, when he got the spinning knockout. But I've always known that Shara Bullet has had grappling because I've actually seen some of his early fights in the regional scene and he can go for takedowns. Michael Venom Page, when do you see him go for a takedown? He literally got taken down by Ian Garry because he was piecing him up. I've seen people say Ian Garry did better than he did in that fight, like on the feet, and it wasn't as bad. No, he got pieced up. People are just jumping on the Garry bandwagon. And we know, everyone who watches this channel knows I'm not a Garry fan. But yeah, Michael Venom Page, I think he's going to get the decision here. I think if anyone's going to shoot, it'll be Magomed because he's getting pieced up. But as we know with Michael Venom Page, he's got really good scrambles and he'll get back to his feet and he'll be able to get the decision. Moving on to the main event of the evening. And my nose is starting to run now. I'm sorry for my annoying voice. Israel Adesanya versus the guy who I couldn't name earlier, Nasruddin Imavov. I love Nasruddin. I think people underrate the guy. I don't like Adesanya, but I actually am a fan of Nasruddin. His Brendan Allen performance won me over. He's looked great in other fights, He's always kind of been that guy who we've worried about his gas tank. He's got the skills, he's got the flashiness. But come on, guys. He's not blooming Pereira against Hernandez here, when he gasses out after 2 minutes. He might have weird kind of performances in the past where he's gassed out weirdly quick, but he's still a high-level operator who's literally made Brendan Allen, who was on an amazing streak, look like he was not on that level. And to add to that, I've never seen anyone with the combination quite as good of flashy striking, but at the same time, balance and great entries for takedowns. And that's something that you won't ever see in this division because middleweight is full of sloppy people like Marvin Vettori who don't know how to wrap up a rear naked choke properly. They literally just have the arms around the neck and think it's a chokehold that you do on your mate in primary school. So I'm not going to really hold out much hope for anyone being able to beat Nasruddin Imavov other than the champion, obviously, Drinkers du Plessis and Sean Strickland, who's shown in the past. They're the only two people in this division I see beating Imavov. Prime Adesanya, don't want to mention that word too much after the Bryce Mitchell comments. Prime Adesanya versus Prime Adolf. But yeah, I think Prime Adesanya was someone who could give someone like an Imavov problem simply because he's so good at defending takedowns. But once you've been taken down by du Plessis, and I ain't being funny, du Plessis' strength isn't the fact that he's an amazing wrestler. Fair enough, if he's fighting a Darren Till, he might look like it, but everyone takes Darren Till down. But Drinkers du Plessis' strength is volume. Complete opposite to Imavov, who went nowhere near the gas tank of a Duplessis. But the reason I really think this is even worse for Adesanya is because Imavov has got more explosivity. I think Duplessis has more volume, but Imavov is like just an explosion waiting to happen. And Adesanya has always struggled with people like that. People who have that really, really quick, fast twitch muscle fibre have always given problems. Robert Whittaker's a good example of that. So I'm going with Imavov here. That's a great example, actually, of the type of fighter Imavov reminds me of, a Prime Whittaker. So I think Prime Whittaker versus Adesanya back in the day, except it's going to be a non-Prime Adesanya. That's how I see this fight going. I think if I was to predict the exact round, it'd be round 4 by way of fence, just absolute obliteration. Shots rained in, Alex Pereira style. Adesanya ain't going to be coming back with the Hail Mary knockout there. I think he's lost his spark that he used to have, in my opinion, against Duplessis. If that had been the Pereira fight a few years before, he'd have definitely took advantage of Duplessis storming in back in that fight, because it reminded me a lot of the Alex Pereira the second fight, but also the first fight. Well, it's going to be a finish similar to that first fight, except Adesanya is going to be actually knocked out cold, and he's going to be unrecoverable from here, and he'll be out of the UFC. Please, I can't stand the guy. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you soon.